to get onto the Temple Mount. Heavy security. Interesting situation here in 1967 after nearly 2,000 years of the temple not being in other hands, that Jews finally recaptured it on June 5th at the end of the 6-Day War, and at that time they could have reclaimed the location of the temple and knocked down the Dome of the Rock, rebuilt their temple, but so as not to upset the Muslims and the rest of the world and start another huge war, the Israelis decided to hand control of the Temple Mount to the Muslims. It's now administered by what's called the Muslim Walk, and so kind of strange. Technically, the Israelis own and control the Temple Mount, but they let the Muslims administer it. So we all have to adhere to the Muslim rules, and interesting situation up here. Coming up onto the Temple Mount. Am I allowed to film? Okay to film? Okay? It's the Western Wall. So I'm going up the fancy ramp here that they made for non-Muslims at the end of the Temple Mount. And going through security, the Muslim guard asked me if I had a Bible, and I said yes, it's in my backpack, and they confiscated it. So I'll be able to get it back later, but I'm not allowed to even take a Bible up here. So.
Quando c'è stata la guerra del 67 che questo luogo è stato preso, gli israeliani avrebbero
So this is the Dome of the Rock. This is a Muslim shrine. It was built in 691 AD, shortly after the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem. And this is actually considered the third holiest site in Islam, and it commemorates the Prophet Muhammad's night journey, where he, the story is that he, in a vision or a dream, or maybe even physically, he rode on a flying steed from Mecca to the farthest mosque of the north, which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque that's down below. We'll look at that in a minute. And there's a stone inside the Dome of the Rock where the story is that Muhammad flew from this stone up to heaven and visited with God and everything. So very important site to the Muslims. Also happens to be a very important site to Jews, and it should be an important site to Christians as well. This was the exact spot of the first and second temples. This was where David bought the threshing floor from Araunah. That threshing floor is inside the dome here, and his son Solomon built the temple here, and the stone is called the foundation stone, and that formed the inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. After the Babylonians tore down the first temple 70 years later, Zerubbabel, always fun to say, built the second temple, and so this was where the temple was during Jesus' day, and of course that was the temple that was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. So for the last 1400 years, the Dome of the Rock has been protecting this extremely important site that, again, I'd love to get in there and see it. I'm not a Muslim, and just no Muslims allowed in there since 2007. And just the way that it is, but just to be this close to it. Again, that was the inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. The foundation stone is where the Ark of the Covenant sat. No one could go in the inner sanctuary except for the high priest, and he could only go in one day out of the year. That was Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and go in and atone for the sins of the nation of Israel. So very, very special place. Jews won't even come up here because it's considered so sacred. But someday this building will be gone, the Bible tells us, and Jewish prophecy tells us, and the third temple will be built. And then one day, soon after that, very soon after that, actually precisely 3.5 years after that, Jesus is going to come back, and our Messiah is going to rule and reign from this spot, the third temple. During the Crusades from 1099 AD to 1187, the Knights Templar, who took their name from the Temple Mount, they venerated the Dome of the Rock as the location of Solomon's Temple, and they actually made the Al-Aqsa Mosque their headquarters. So this is where the Knights Templar hung out during the Crusades. It's the entrance to the dome. This is the way in. So I can't go inside the Dome of the Rock, but I happen to find this window here on the side, so don't see any walk guards around. Anyways, there's a grate here, and I can actually see inside the Dome of the Rock, and I can see there's a wall here. I'm going to try to film it, and behind that wall is the foundation stone. The foundation stone's about 1,000 square feet approximately. I couldn't find the exact dimensions of it, but I'm guessing about 1,000 square feet or so. And again, this is where the Ark of the Covenant sat during the First Temple period. This was the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary. So on top of the foundation stone, there's a groove cut that's exactly 2.5 by 1.5 cubits, so 2.5 cubits long by 1.5 cubits wide, which are the exact dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant as specified in the Torah. But my twin brother Aaron actually pointed out to me in Scripture where the Jews were never allowed to make an altar or anything like that, anything holy with metal. So the Jews would not have cut that groove in the foundation stone. So that was actually most likely done by the Crusaders, the Christian Crusaders, when they came in and took over Jerusalem from 1099 AD to 1187 AD, when the Muslims came back and reconquered Jerusalem under Saladin we call him. Anyways, the foundation stone, there's a very strange, you can't actually see the stone, but you can see I don't think you can, I'm going to have to check this video later, but you can see the wall that surrounds it, and on top of the foundation stone there's a weird hole that goes down into a cave underneath. There's also stairs leading down into the cave. The cave is called the Well of Souls, which you might remember from the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. It's actually here, not in Egypt, like in the movie. They say that if you stand down there and tap on the floor of the Well of Souls with your foot, it makes a hollow, resounding sound, as if there was a cave or something underneath the cave, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute here. So now we're walking away from the Dome of the Rock. We're walking toward the southwest, back in the direction of the Old City, and I'm actually standing now, I believe, just about where Warren's Gate enters underneath the Temple Mount. Before the Jewish temple was built, the Ark of the Covenant was subject to theft. It was an object of great desire by other peoples. Probably the most famous story is when the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant, and King David had to get his guys together and hunt him down and retrieve the ark. When King Solomon, King David's son, built the temple, and of course we know that King Solomon was considered the wisest man in the world, he took this fact into consideration, and he created a contingency plan to protect the ark in case anything ever happened to the temple. So the story is that King Solomon utilized the complex system of caves and caverns and tunnels that run underneath the Temple Mount, because the Temple Mount sits atop Mount Moriah, which of course is a natural mountain, so it's not a smooth surface, but a very complex system of caves running underneath where I'm standing here. So anyways, again, I'm standing just about where Warren's Gate enters the Temple Mount, and if you caught my story about that, in 1981, 3 rabbis, and I only know the name of 2 of them, I couldn't track down the name of the third, but 3 rabbis were doing really an illegal excavation underneath the Temple Mount through Warren's Gate, and they claim to have located, based on knowledge that supposedly has been passed down for centuries among Jewish rabbis, knowledge of the exact location of the Ark of the Covenant. They claim to have discovered the chamber where the Ark of the Covenant is kept, and based on diagrams I've seen and just my discussion with Rabbi Richman and etc., I'm thinking that I am standing at just about the right location here. So if all of this is true and accurate, then the Ark of the Covenant is somewhere below my feet here, maybe 50 feet down, maybe 100 feet down, not quite sure, but Indiana Jones, eat your heart out. This is IDF, Israeli soldiers taking a tour. Now I'm in search of the Golden Gate, what we call the Mercy Gate, and there's a reason why it's down here on the Temple Mount. Big mess. Kind of hidden and ignored. This is the other thing that I really wanted to see up on the Temple Mount, and it's finding kind of hard to get down here and find this place. Seems a little bit neglected. This is called the Golden Gate. It's what the Jews call the Mercy Gate, or Sha'ar HaRachamim. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is actually where Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and it so angered the Pharisees. Scholars say that this is one of the main reasons that the Pharisees had him arrested and crucified, because of the implications of coming through this gate. The book of Ezekiel actually talks about the Golden Gate when Ezekiel describes, just before the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, he describes the Spirit of God, the Shekinah, the Shekinah glory of God, leaving the temple and standing in the threshold of the temple and crossing through the courtyard. And he says that the Spirit of the Lord moved across the Temple Mount toward the Mount of Olives and exited Jerusalem through the Golden Gate, the Mercy Gate, and crossed the Kidron Valley and ascended the Mount of Olives, where he ascended to heaven. So, and then of course we know that Jesus ascended to heaven from the Mount of Olives also. So the idea or the impression is that the Spirit of God, whenever he comes into Jerusalem, it's through this gate. Whenever he leaves Jerusalem, it's through this gate. According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah, when he comes, will enter through this gate. And again, that really upset the Pharisees when Jesus entered through this gate because of that fact. And ever since the destruction of the temple, the Jews have been praying here for God to restore Israel and to restore this gate, and for the Messiah to eventually come through it. And this is why they call it the Gate of the Mercy. They're praying for God's mercy to restore this gate. And because of this, when the Ottoman Muslims took over Jerusalem and started to put the city together how they wanted, they built the walls of the old city in 1540, and just 1 year later they decided to seal off the Golden Gate, and that's really why it's in a state of disrepair here and kind of ignored, because it's sealed off. It's a useless gate. The reason they did this is because of this Jewish concept and also Christian concept of the Messiah entering Jerusalem through the Golden Gate, and the Muslims want to prevent this. So this stonework they put in place, sealing this off, is supposedly going to keep out the Messiah. Kind of funny. Oh, and they've also built a cemetery on the other side of this wall, which I can't see from here, of course, but I'll see that when I'm in the Kidron Valley in a couple days. But so there's a Muslim cemetery at the outside of this wall, the base of it, based on the concept that the Messiah will never cross through a cemetery. So the Muslims really pulled out all the stops, trying to keep Jesus from coming back in. Someday he will walk right across here, walk up there, and sit in the third temple. Is this the Muslim quarter?
You are in a Muslim quarter. This area is Muslim quarter.
Okay, so I thought.
You have been like some mosque?
What's bar mitzvah. They're going to the Western Wall, and I went back to the Waqf and got my Bible back. So, yay! This is a major archaeological dig at the southwest corner of the Temple Mount. This is called the Southern Wall, and just like the Western Wall tunnels, this exposes a lot of the remains of the Temple Mount from the Second Temple period, the time when Jesus was here. And so no longer is the Western Wall the only exposed part of the Temple Mount from that period. Lots of new stuff here. It's the southwest corner of the Temple Mount, West Jerusalem, up on the hill. That's Mount Zion, and this is my first good look at East Jerusalem, which is part of the Palestinian territory. Wow. And this is the Kidron Valley down below here, which actually plays heavily into the end time story. And this is actually the city of David, looking at here. I believe the Palestinian name for the town now is Silwan, or Silwan. And this is the Mount of Olives, the old Jewish cemetery, also important. And on top of the Mount of Olives, the Church of the Ascension, which I'll be visiting in a couple days. And that's the southeast corner of the Temple Mount. Jerusalem. Muslim call to prayer? Not quite sure. been noticing as I've been going around the old city, all these vertical slots in the Ottoman period walls, and I guess a good guess would be this is where the archers would stand to defend the city. I'm now walking on the rampart of the old city wall. This is the wall that goes around the whole old city of Jerusalem. Again, these openings and slots are where the archers would position themselves to defend the city against invaders. I'm at what's called the Huldah Gates. This was a double gate set up here. You can see the eastern gate there, and it's closed off now, walled off. Has been for centuries. And there was a grand staircase that ran from the eastern gates all the way across here. A little breaking in there. It's the stairs there. And then the western gate, which is today blocked off by a big medieval structure there. But this would have been the main entrance to the Temple Mount during the time of Jesus. So Jesus himself, probably many times, maybe even when he visited as a boy, this is how he entered the Temple Mount. And the gates would enter through a big tunnel and then exit dramatically very close to the temple itself. It's a closer look at the eastern gate. So again, Jesus himself was right here and passed through these gates when they were open 2,000 years ago. Here's the western gate, and again blocked off by this medieval structure here. And unfortunately they've had to replace the steps themselves with some more modern ones. So people can go up and down, which is probably good for me since I'm operating on about 2 hours of sleep. So don't need to fall down these. Looks like some remnants of the original steps here. Wow. Pretty cool. And again, just all this unearthed just within this generation. It's all been buried for many, many, many centuries. This is what's left of what's called Robinson's Arch, discovered in 1838 by an American archaeologist named Edward Robinson. And this was one of only 3 bridges that led into the Temple Mount during the time of Jesus. And here's what it actually looked like, my notes here. So that arch up there was this spot here. So there used to be a gate there that went out on the Temple Mount. And now, of course, you know, that's sealed off. It's been sealed off for centuries. So the stairs would have started right about here. So cool to actually be here. And then, let's see, they would have gone around here, and then an arch, 2 arches, would have been over the street right here. Down here, this was all built during Herodian times, King Herod. Down here, these are shops where the money changers worked, and the people selling offerings, you know, temple sacrifices. So that's where they were. And then this street here, again, Herodian era. This street was put in the time of King Herod. Notice that it's all shattered and broken, and these big piles of boulders. And I got very excited when I saw this. For me, this is the most exciting pile of rubble I've ever seen, and I'll explain. Shalom. About 10 years ago, I got curious to really learn the truth about the end times, and I sat down and actually started in Matthew chapter 24, and this one chapter, I can say, honestly changed my life. Got me on track to write my book and get into all the things I'm interested in now, and my teaching and research and everything. And in this chapter, Jesus gives this great end times dissertation. He goes into detail about the events that will lead up to the Great Tribulation, which we're living in now, that time period, very close to that last 7 years. He goes into detail about the tribulation itself, the Antichrist seating himself in the temple, the trials that we'll go through during that time, and then finally his return and the resurrection and the rapture. So this chapter is very close to my heart, and here's how it starts. I got my Bible back from the Muslim walk this morning, so I can actually read out of it, thank God. Matthew chapter 24, verses 1 and 2. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." Then after he was crucified, about 36 years later, this prophecy came true. The Romans invaded Jerusalem and burned the city and killed many, many people, and they destroyed the second temple. And what we see here, it's not actually remnants of the temple, but it's other structures that were up on the Temple Mount. These are the actual boulders that were thrown down, and behind me again, that's the street that was here during the time of Christ, and even the streets all broken up. So these giant boulders, the Roman soldiers stood up above me on the Temple Mount wall and cast them down just like Jesus had predicted. So kind of funny to be so excited about a big pile of rocks, but feel a interesting kind of closeness to this place. And most importantly of all, finally scored some cafe. Thank God.
جهد أكثر من نتفرج.
It's my restaurant tonight. Just got here. Heard the food is excellent. Definitely a cool view. Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Dome of the Rock, of course. My giant backpack and no food yet, but it's a nice Russian couple trying to tell me where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. Я думаю, что это Church. Я знаю, как говорит Church.
Могила, гробница.
Как говорит Church?
Гроб Господень.
Гроб Господень. Гроб Господень. Вот он.
Я не знаю.
Вот купол.
Хорошо. Я думаю, что это... Нет?
Нет,
Нет.
Это лютеранская.
So that's not the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Хорошо. Большое спасибо.
Не за что.
So here's my dinner and delicious mint flavored lemonade, really good. Just found out this is a Palestinian restaurant and my waiter's Palestinian, very nice guy. Good food. Yerushalayim in West Jerusalem. Not super fancy, but it's sweet. I got a separate bedroom and kitchen, and here's the view out my window. It's about 7 o'clock at night right now. Came back early because last night I got exactly 2 hours of sleep, and somehow had a really great day. Anyways, but I'm thinking tonight might be a good idea to play a little bit of catch up. And again, this is West Jerusalem, this is King George Street, and that's the top of what's called the Ben Yehuda Mall, which is a big pedestrian shopping area, and just a really nice feeling over this city, the Jewish parts, I should say. But it's just, you can really feel it here. There is peace over the city. It's amazing.